Happy Monday. I hope your weekend was awesome. All-star break this week, and since tonight is the Home Run Derby, I thought we'd dedicate today to looking at home runs when it comes to Toronto Blue Jay franchise history.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends. Craig Ballard, Locked On Blue Jays. Yes, indeed, been locked on the Toronto Blue Jays ever since I can remember. This is my first season, my first year hosting this podcast. But yes, Blue Jay baseball, a big deal for me, a big deal for my family as well. I'm also a basketball and a football enthusiast, a big-time fan. You would say there, Lakers, Raptors, Miami Dolphins, but nothing comes close. Nothing means more to me from a sports standpoint than Toronto Blue Jay baseball. So I certainly thank you for spending part of your day talking Toronto Blue Jay baseball with me. It's the All-Star break week, but hey, here on the Locked On Blue Jay podcast, we've still got content for you that I hope you're really going to enjoy, some guests that I'm really excited about, and some content that I'm really excited to bring you this week. I want to remind you that the Locked On Blue Jay podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also a quick reminder that all of the Blue Jay action this season can be taken in on SiriusXM. If you're taking on today's Locked On Blue Jay podcast episode on the Locked On Blue Jay podcast YouTube channel, hello to you. Thank you for that. Please hit that like, leave that comment, hit that subscribe, help the podcast grow. And to the everydayers making the Locked On Blue Jay podcast their first podcast listen every day, hello to you as well. Thank you to you as well. Please do hit that 5-star rating and leave that review. Now, there was a famous Nike ad campaign for baseball in the late 90s and the early 2000s with stud pitchers Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux, and it was all about, the tagline was that chicks dig the long ball. Well, today, since it's a home run derby, we're deep diving the Toronto Blue Jays and the long ball. Let's start with the Toronto Blue Jay who hit the most home runs in a Toronto Blue Jay uniform. That, of course, Carlos Delgado. I call him Carlos Del Suado because my gosh, so many times it was like a fly swatter up there, and the baseballs were the flies, and he was just swatting them, doing whatever he wanted to do. Carlos Delgado was one of the first truly special hitters for the Toronto Blue Jays. There was, he was in the 2000s, right? So there was that whole outfield, of course. Barfield, Bell, Mosby, Willie Upshaw was a hitter. The Blue Jays had hitters in the 80s, certainly. We know the Joe Carters, the Roberto Alomars, the John Olerwoods. We know the Blue Jays had hitters in the 90s as well, but from just an absolute masher, and annually as well, Carlos Delgado, he doesn't take a backseat to anybody, in particular when it comes to Toronto Blue Jay lore. 11 seasons, Carlos Delgado hit at least 30 home runs, including doing that 7 times with the Toronto Blue Jays. He would hit 336 career home runs as a Toronto Blue Jay. Is that good? Is that a lot? Wow. Carlos Del Suado, wow. He had 3 seasons with the Toronto Blue Jays where he had 40-plus home runs. That includes back-to-back 40-plus home run seasons in 1999 and the year 2000. And that year 2000, there's actually a few, that 2003 as well, but that year 2000 was as good a season as we have ever seen from any player in a Toronto Blue Jay uniform. The year 2000, and if you're around for that, you remember that. What does year 2000, what does it make you remember, right? We were just so thankful there was Blue Jay baseball. We were so thankful there was anything, because Y2K, you remember all the Y2K stuff. Well, of course, it came and went. Had the 2000 season. Delgado was a monster in 99 as well, by the way. But that year 2000 played all 162 games that led baseball. Carlos Delgado in the year 2000 had a 344 batting average, 470 on base percentage. I better say that again, because you're going to realize, right? He played all 162 games. He had over 700 at bats, and his on base percentage was 470. So at playing every single day, and he was on base almost half of the time. Insane. The OPS that season was 1,134. Like, oh my goodness. 41 home runs, 137 RBIs. Holy moly. 41 long balls, 137 RBIs. He led baseball in games played in 2000. He led baseball in doubles in 2000. He led baseball in total bases in 2000. He led baseball in hit by pitcher, of course, as you can imagine, right? Pitchers like crazy trying to come in on him, trying to do something to get him off the plate, because he was Carlos Del Suado. He was Carlos Del Suado. Now, we could talk about that 2003 Delgado season as well. It was absolutely insane. It was another video game season by him. But I want to talk about one of the games in 2003, and that was on September 25th against the then Devil Rays. This is the Carlos Tosca era for the Toronto Blue Jays in 2003, and they're playing the then Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and they're managed at that point, at this time, by Lou Piniella. And Carlos Delgado, in the first inning, he would hit a 3-run home run off of Jorge Sosa, and it would give the Blue Jays a 3-0 lead. Now, quick funny story here. It was a career home run number 300 for Del Suato. He smashed it so hard it went to windows and smashed off the windows and back onto the playing field. As Delgado was rounding the bases, he noticed it was back on the playing field. He was asking, who was it? Was it Mariano Duncan, I think, was the Rays' second baseman at the time? He was asking the Rays infielders as he was rounding the base, hey, I see that ball there. That's a career milestone. Can you get that ball for me? An usher comes on the field, grabs the ball, and tosses it into the stands. I believe into the right field stands. Oh, my goodness. So there goes. So that souvenir ball is attainable. That souvenir ball is there for Delgado. The usher ends up messing it up. Yeah. So that was his 300th career home run. Now, that was in the first inning. That made the game 3-0 Toronto Blue Jays. Now, Delgado would come up again to lead off the fourth inning, again off Jorge Sosa, and he would hit a home run that would make the score 4-1. So Delgado in the first and the fourth, his first two at-bats, has home runs. As a side note, his career against Jorge Sosa, 14 for 27 with 7 home runs against. I mean, you talk about ownership. Delgado, 14 for 27 against Jorge Sosa with 7 long balls. There was 2 of them right there. Now Delgado comes up again for the third time in the bottom of the 6th inning. Devil Rays have actually taken a 6-5 lead. Delgado hits a leadoff home run to tie the game off of Joe Kennedy, 6-all. Comes up again. Delgado up for his 4th at bat, leading off the bottom of the 8th. Devil Rays again have taken the lead. It's 8-7 Devil Rays. Carlos Delgado leadoff home run against Lance Carter. Oh my God. 4 for 4 in the game. All 4 hits were home runs. Blue Jay record. Jays would go on to win that game 10-8. But yeah, so not only a milestone, a home run in that game for Carlos Delgado, but 4 for 4 with 4 home runs. Haven't seen it since. Not even sure that that's something that we will see again. Just, I mean, eye pop emoji. Now, of course, you're talking home runs in Toronto Blue Jay lore. Delgado, yes, but I mean, very obviously, Jose Bautista is entering the chat, right? Of course. Jose Bautista, this guy was on the major league level for at least parts of the 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, and 2009 season. All told, he'd played with 4 teams over those seasons, had 74 career home runs. That's from 2004 to 2009. Now, here comes 2010. Jose Bautista, 54 home runs in 2010. That 2010 Blue Jay team as well would set the franchise record with 254 home runs. So they had 200 outside of Jose alone. I mean, wow, was that a masher team as well? Who was that? That was a Brad a Fulmer, a Raul Mondesi days then, right? I mean, wow, they could hit home runs for sure. But yeah, Bautista, 54. Between 2010 and 2015, nobody would hit more home runs in all of baseball than Jose Bautista, and his 288 career home runs as a Blue Jay. That's second only to Carlos Delgado. Now, that incredible 2010 season, again, he comes into 2010 with 74 career home runs, and he launches 54 that season alone. Are you absolutely kidding me? And you couldn't see it coming, not just because 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, he was with 4 different teams bouncing around, not just because of that, but even as 2010 season, even as that was unfolding, you couldn't see this coming. Jose Bautista, in the first month of the season, he had 4 home runs. In the third month of the season, he had 4 home runs. How the heck is he getting all these? How did he get to 54? Well, he had a dozen in the second month of the season, so he went 4, 12, 4. He would end up with 24 at the All-Star break, hit another 30 after the All-Star break. And what's amazing, he had 31 prior to the 2011 All-Star break. So he hit 30 after the 2010 All-Star breaks, hits 31 prior to the 2011 All-Star break. So all told, over those 157 games, Bautista launched 61 home runs. It's pretty epic. That's pretty epic. 1 month from now, of course, Saturday, August 12th, Jose Bautista, for all that he's done, and we'll touch on the bat flip a little later on when we talk about some, historic home runs in Toronto Blue Jay franchise history. But of course, and you know what, I'll mention too about the bat flip home run. And just real quick, I just want to say as well that obviously that was epic, and part of what made that so epic is the Blue Jays would hang on to win that game. Well, in that Kansas City series, in a few of those playoff series in 15 and 16 for the Blue Jays, games that the Jays would go on to lose, many you could say the Jays would go on to blow, but okay. But anyway, ultimately, either way, however you look at it, go on to lose and big important games too. Man, Jose Bautista was hitting home runs late in these games too to tie it. I mean, he was not just a home run machine for the Toronto Blue Jays. He hit a lot of important home runs for the Toronto Blue Jays. Shout out Jose Bautista. More digging into the Toronto Blue Jays and the long ball in just a moment. But first, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes in life, we're faced with tough choices and the path forward isn't always clear. Now, whether you're dealing with decisions around career, relationships, or anything else, you name it, therapy can help you stay connected with what you really want in life and how you navigate life so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything else. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. Well, therapy can help you with learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself, and it isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonmlb today. You'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonmlb. Now let's get into some home runs of the big variety, not the important variety, but the big. So one swing, putting 4 runs on the board just like that. So of course we're talking grand slams. Let's get into some of that talk. How many guesses would it take for you to land on this player as the Toronto Blue Jay who hit the most grand slams, obviously as a Toronto Blue Jay in their career? This player had 4 grand slams as a Toronto Blue Jay. I definitely would have had Delgado as a guess. Vernon Wells hit cleanup for so many years. I would have had him as a guess. Geez, Edwin I would have had as a guess. I may have even gone to Alex Rios as a guess before I went to the actual answer. Do you know it? Lourdes Gurriel Jr., peanut power. When the bases were loaded, Lourdes wasn't fooling around. My goodness, you don't really think of him as a home run hitter, but 4 grand slamies as a Toronto Blue Jay for Lourdes Gurriel Jr. It's a franchise record. How about walk-off grand slams? I mean, can it get more exciting than a walk-off grand slam? Well, the first ever walk-off grand slam, that's by my favorite Blue Jay ever. Right there, number 11, George Bell. Back on September 4th, 1988, he had the walk-off grand slam. Now, the franchise record for the most walk-off grand slams as a Blue Jay is 2, and that's Steve Pearce. And Steve Pearce, they were both, I think they were like 5 days apart, if you can believe that. And one of them was an ultimate grand slam. That was on July 30th, 2017 versus the Angels. Now, an ultimate grand slam is when you come up in the bottom of the 9th or extra innings in your team's last at bat, and your team is trailing by 3 runs. So you need that grand slam to take the lead and win the game. Well, that's what Steve Pearce did. How cool is that? And I mean, shout out to Steve Pearce as well. He was traded from the Blue Jays to the Boston Red Sox, won a World Series MVP with the Boston Red Sox a few years back. And the player that the Blue Jays got in return, I know he's struggling right now, but to be honest, I hope he's going to be a nice trade piece that adds a nice piece of the puzzle for the 2023 Toronto Blue Jays, and that is Santiago Espinal. You didn't think Santiago Espinal's name would come up in a show all about home runs, right? But hey, there it was right there. How about most home runs in a single month? Well, that's Edwin Encarnacion. He had 16 back in back in May of 2015. 16 home runs in 1 month. Oh my goodness. Even that season, Bautista had the 54. The highest month he had was 12. He had some 11s and some 10s in there as well, but 16. He had 11 games, Edwin had 11 different games that month where he hit at least 1 home run. He had 4 different games that month where he hit 2 home runs. My gosh. Hey, throw up the 4 fingers. Intentionally walk this guy. I mean, is that hot or is that hot? Holy moly. There are 2 Toronto Blue Jays who in franchise history have had 2 home runs in 1 inning. And we'll start with the most recent because, again, that's Edwin. That's our guy, Edwin. Edwin back on July 26, 2013. And just as a side note, when Edwin was here, I often wondered if other fan bases had an understanding of just how fun he was. He was one, I know funnest isn't a word, but Edwin Encarnacion is one of the funnest Toronto Blue Jays players I've ever cheered for. He was such a joy and I'm going to use the word experience. It was an experience, a really good experience watching Edwin Encarnacion. But anyway, on that day back in 2013, July 26th, so it's almost the anniversary of that, isn't it? Almost the 9-year anniversary of that, or 9-year anniversary, almost the 10-year anniversary of that. If I can do the math, that'd be great. But Jays home to the Mariners, down 6-4 in the bottom of the 7th. And now that seventh inning stretch must have been epic. So the Blue Jays are down 6-4 at home. Seventh inning stretch that day must have been incredible because Edwin leads off that bottom of the seventh against the Houston Astros, and Paul Clemens hits a home run to make it 6-5. And then 9 batters later in that same inning, here comes Edwin Encarnacion again with the bases loaded. He hits a grand slam. Jays going to win 12-6. Is that a good inning from Edwin Encarnacion? I know Fernando Tatis, Fernando Tatis Jr.'s dad, Fernando Tatis. I remember watching the game where he got 2 grand slams in one inning. Pardon? Yeah. I mean, you talk about epic, right? But hey, Edwin's just smidge behind that, right? A leadoff home run to get the Jays right back in the game, get all that momentum, and then at the end of that inning, a grand slam. I mean, my gosh, wow! The grand slam was off of Hector Hombres, if you remember him. Wasn't a major leaguer for long. Neither was Paul Clemens, but Edwin taking care of business there. Now, how about back on October 3rd of 1993? This is the final game of the season for the 1993 Toronto Blue Jays. Of course, we know the time frame, right? October 3rd, 1993. So that's the defending champion Blue Jays from 92 who are about to become the 2-time champions as we go through the playoffs in 93. And that's largely, right, on the strength of the touch 'em all Joe, you'll never hit a bigger home run in your life. Well, the 2 home runs in one inning we're about to talk about here was Joe Carter. Final game of the season. It's at Baltimore. The Orioles score a pair of runs in the bottom of the first inning. They're up 2-0. Here we go to the top of the second inning. Joe Carter leads off that inning, with the home run against Ben McDonald to make it 2-1. And then 9 batters later would face Ben McDonald again, would hit a home run again. Second home run of the inning. That would make the score 8-2. Remember, it was 2-0 Baltimore coming into that inning. Joe's multiple home runs would make it 8-2. Jays would go on to an 11-6 victory. Ben McDonald, shout out to you if you remember Ben McDonald. I mean, he was a massive. His Upper Deck rookie card was all the rage. Everybody wanted to have it. Think of the Ellie De La Cruz, craze now, or people trying to get Shohei Ohtani rookie card. Like this was Ben McDonald. He was a big time, hugely highly touted pitching prospect for the Baltimore Orioles that, safe to say, did not work out. And on this particular day back in 1993, oh boy, he became part of the record books, part of the Toronto Blue Jay record books for the wrong reason. How about on the pitching side? How about the most home runs allowed in a season? That was 36 in 1998 by Woody Williams. 36 home runs in one season. But oh my goodness, wow, Woody Williams. Eesh. He was very up and down as a Toronto Blue Jay. The most home runs allowed by a Blue Jay team was the 2012 Toronto Blue Jays. They allowed 204 home runs. Allowing 204 home runs, I mean, there's nothing ideal about that, but it just feels to me like to have that be the franchise worst for home runs allowed in the season. It's actually not even all that bad. Most home runs allowed in a game by a pitcher. It's he actually did this twice in 1995 and again then in 1997, once against the then Cleveland Indians and the other against the hated Boston Red Sox. And that's somebody that I'm really trying to get to come on the show because I'm just such a fan, not just of him as a pitcher and what he did for the Toronto Blue Jays. He won a Cy Young as a Toronto Blue Jay, but if you've ever heard him in an interview or a podcast setting, I just find him to be so well thought out. I found him to be, when it comes to baseball, I find him to be downright brilliant. That's Pat Henkin. We're about to get into some historic Blue Jay dingers in just a moment, but first I did want to mention our new sponsor, Sleeper. Sleeper is a fantasy sports plus real money gaming app focused on bringing people together through sports and gaming. Sleeper has become the fastest organically growing fantasy platform in the world, over 5 million active users last year alone, while earning some of the highest levels, or in fact earning the highest levels of engagement per user in the industry. At Sleeper, it's not just about sports. It's about building personal connections and lasting memories. Sleeper Picks is a real money product that connects friends over picks. You choose 2 to 8 of your favorite players from the pregame or the live, or even across different sports, and then you pick higher or lower than the predicted stats. Only on Sleeper can you get up to 100 times payouts. Share with your friends and get rewarded together. You can get higher payouts than other apps using less picks. Yeah. Use the promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. third and final segment for today's episode is it is the home run derby today. So we are deep diving all things home runs in Toronto Blue Jay franchise history. Of course, if there was a Toronto Blue Jay game today, you could catch that on Sirius XM. And just want to have a quick reminder here that the Locked On Blue Jay podcast, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, going to get into some historic home runs in Toronto Blue Jay franchise history, but I wanted to touch on something that just really, really fascinates me. The Toronto Blue Jay franchise record for most runs in one inning is 11. It's happened twice. And one of the times, so let's look at these two here, because and home runs are involved here as well, and franchise records are involved here as well. So the first time, it's actually happened the last two seasons. So the first time the Blue Jays scored 11 runs in one inning, that was on September 11th of 2021. It was, if I remember correctly, it was the second game of a doubleheader versus the Baltimore Orioles. And remember, in those days, 2021, the doubleheader was 7 innings. So in the top of the seventh, it was at Baltimore. So in the top of the seventh, so the last inning of this doubleheader, it's 1-0 Baltimore. I was about to say Bo Jackson. Where'd that come from? Bo Bichette. Thank you. Bo Bichette gets a 2-run home run. 2 batters later, Alejandro Kirk gets a 2-run home run. Remember, it was 1-0 coming into this. All of a sudden, a couple home runs. A few batters later, Marcus Semien gets a 3-run home run. And a few batters later, Teo gets a 3-run home run. So 4 home runs in one inning. That's a franchise record. I mean, my gosh, from 0 runs to 11 in the very last inning. I know seventh, ninth inning is not your traditional last inning, but the game was on the line. Jays were down 1-0. They end up winning that game 11-2. Baltimore scored 1. Good for them in the bottom of the seventh, and their own 7 inning there. But the other time, so there's 4 home runs in that 11-run inning, Blue Jay franchise record. Now, the other time the Jays have scored 11 runs in one inning was last season, July 22nd, in that 28-5 beatdown at Fenway Park in Boston. Not only did they not hit any home runs, how crazy is that? 11 runs, no home runs. But if you remember that inning, the first 2 batters of that inning got out. Pardon me? Do you believe that? Then the Blue Jays would have 12 straight batters reach base, 2 walks, and 10 hits. With 2 outs that inning, the Toronto Blue Jays would get 8 RBI hits. They would have 8 hits that inning with runners in scoring position. Do the 2023 Blue Jays even have 8 hits with runners in scoring position total for the whole season? I mean, holy moly. Wow. 11 runs with 4 home runs. Of course, that makes sense to me. 11 runs in one inning with no home runs. Wow. That's why I wanted to bring that up. The contrast there really, really fascinate me. Now, when you're talking historic home runs, of course, from the Toronto Blue Jays, everydayers will know we've deep dived the bat flip. Actually, we deep dived the bat flip on a few Throwback Thursdays ago with Tim Leeper, who was the Blue Jays first base coach at that time. I mean, did he have an incredible perspective? He had all the behind the scenes things, and during the actual bat flap, easy for me to say here, my goodness, during the actual bat flip home run itself, he's standing on first base. I mean, he's got the best seats in the house for this whole thing. So he had some epic retelling of that. And of course, the touch 'em all Joe, you'll never hit a bigger home run in your life, right? The 1993 World Series winning home run, Joe Carter off of Mitch Williams. And actually, was it 2? Well, it was a couple of Throwback Thursdays as well ago. We had Rob Butler, some Canadian content, Rob Butler, who was on the 1993 World Series, the champion Toronto Blue Jay team. So again, somebody who had an incredible seat to that Joe Carter home run and all the behind the scenes stuff. And he was a fantastic guest, had some great stories. And everydayers will know, because we've deep dived that home run, of course, so important in Blue Jay lore and Blue Jay franchise history. I remain to this day so fascinated by the fact that was a 2-0 count. Then Mitch Williams threw Joe Carter a slider that ended up on his back right foot. That's how out of the strike zone it was. Just dove right out of the strike zone. Carter swung over the top of it. He was totally fooled by that pitch, totally flat-footed swing. And then Mitch Williams looks in for the next sign from Darren Daulton, the Phillies catcher at the time. Rest in peace, Darren Daulton, who Rob Butler actually would become a teammate of later, and just raved on the Locked On Blue Jay podcast about what a human being Darren Daulton was. But Mitch Williams would shake off Darren Daulton. Daulton wanted the fastball. Williams wanted to go back to that slider. He thought he had Joe Carter shook with that slider. The veteran was ready for the slider, and we know that the rest is history. So we could deep dive those when you're talking about a show just completely based on home runs. But truth be told, and on Locked On Blue Jays, we have deep dived those 2 home runs before. So let's get into some other ones here. When you're talking historic home runs, how about Marcus Semien? Most home runs ever by a second baseman. 20 in 2021. He had 45. I mean, my goodness. Let's go back to the 2016 Toronto Blue Jays, and now they played the Baltimore Orioles in the wild card game. Each team had an 89-73 record, but the Blue Jays hosted the wild card game on the strength of a 10-9 season series advantage for the Blue Jays over the Orioles. In that game, Jose Bautista, speaking of home runs and speaking of Jose Bautista like we were earlier, well, he opens the scoring by leading off the second inning with a home run off of Chris Tillman. Mark Trumbo would hit a 2-run Trump bomb versus Marcus Stroman. And then in the bottom of the fifth, Ezekiel Cabrera would single home Michael Saunders to tie the game at 2. So it's 2-all in the fifth. It would stay 2-all till all the way to the bottom of the 11th when Edwin Encarnacion would hit the walk-off home run off of Ubaldo Jimenez. And to this day, I think Buck Showalter and I are the only two human beings on the entire planet who agreed with the move. I also, because remember, the Orioles had their closer, Zach Britton, that did not come in to pitch that game. Buck Showalter didn't. That was first and second for Jimenez when he gave up that home run to Edwin. It was a 3-run home run. Didn't go to his closer. And I'll just tell you, I know I'm in the minority. I know you disagree with me. I would not have gone to the closer either. As the road team, I would have still saved my closer. I would have hoped Ubaldo Jimenez, who had strikeout stuff, I would have hoped he could have got the strikeout or somehow taken care of business against Edwin. And I would have kept my closer if I was the Baltimore Orioles for if I got the lead in extra innings. Now I've got my closer. Now I'm going to win that wild card game. I already know you disagree. I know I'm massively in the minority on that. I want to talk about a few players who, for me, just absolutely remarkable because they're amazing answers. You know, you always see those questions like, hey, who's a player in a sport that you forget played for a different team? I see Patrick Ewing with the Orlando Magic a lot, Hakeem Olajuwon with the Toronto Raptors, things like that, right? Well, two great answers are Jose Canseco and Frank Thomas, both, longtime legends in baseball. For different reasons, each of them, right? Jose, we know, and Frank Thomas, of course, legendary. He's a Hall of Famer. Well, both played a part of their career with the Toronto Blue Jays and both had massive accomplishments as a Toronto Blue Jay. Let's start with Jose Canseco. The slugger hit 462 home runs in his career. He led baseball in home runs twice in his career. Well, he played one season with the Toronto Blue Jays in 1998, and would you believe he hit 46 home runs for the Blue Jays that season? That's his career best. Slugger Jose Canseco's career best season for home runs was his one season with the Toronto Blue Jays, 1998. He hit 46. Now, speaking of home runs, of course, Canseco hit that monster Game 4, a fifth deck home run off of Mike Flanagan in the playoffs against the Blue Jays, 540 feet, longest home run ever measured. Holy moly. Side note, but with some Blue Jay content here. In that same game off Mike Flanagan, Ricky Henderson, who of course would go on to be important for the 93 Toronto Blue Jays, he would hit not one but two home runs in that game off of Mike Flanagan. But you remember that 540-foot home run that Canseco hit into that upper deck at the then Sky Dome? Holy moly. How about Hall of Famer Frank Thomas? The Big Hurt. 521 career home runs for Frank Thomas. 29 of those were with the Toronto Blue Jays. He spent 2007 and part of 2008 with the Toronto Blue Jays. He had his 496th career home run was during that season as a Blue Jay, and that was his 244th as a DH. That's a new Major League Baseball record, passing Edgar Martinez. So Frank Thomas making history as a Toronto Blue Jay. And then less than 2 weeks later, Frank Thomas would hit his milestone and historic career home run number 500. That was a game for the Blue Jays. They were wearing the black uniforms that so many people hate at the Metrodome in Minneapolis against the Twins. Now, shortly after that, Thomas would become frustrated with Blue Jay manager John Gibbons, and the Blue Jays and the Big Hurt would part ways, and Thomas would finish his career later that season with the A's. Well, he would literally, after that season, sign a one-day contract to finish his career with the Chicago White Sox. But yes, you're talking about home runs. I think it's really incredible that Jose Canseco and Frank Thomas had historic home runs as Toronto Blue Jays. That's a wrap for today's Locked On Blue Jay podcast episode. Reminder, you can catch all the Blue Jays games this season on SiriusXM and keep it locked on the Locked On Podcast Network and check out Sully hosting Locked On MLB. We usually end with a Go Jays Go, but since tonight is the Home Run Derby, how about Go Vladdy Go? We'll talk tomorrow.